So ever since the Brexit analysis papers leaked, there have been lots of Brexiteers calling these papers fake. And now, last week, the government actually officially released them. Considering that we've been told time and time again by the government, oh, we can't release these papers, we can't release these papers. So, anti-Brexit campaigners have seized on a bleak Whitehall assessment of the economic impact of leaving the European Union, published following a battle over government secrecy. MPs voted in January for the documents to be released in full, but its publication was resisted by the Brexit Secretary David Davis. The cross-party Brexit Select Committee issued the document, which was prepared to aid thinking inside the government about possible scenarios. On Thursday, as the leaks had suggested, government number crunchers found that the economic growth would suffer under any of the existing models for a future relationship with the EU. A Norway-type European Economic Area model, a free trade agreement, or trading on the basis of the World Trade Organization's WTO rules alone. Under the worst scenario, the WTO rules, the GDP could decline by 7.7% over 15 years. The analysis found, while under the European Economic Area style agreement, it would be 1.6. The committee's chair, Labour MP Hilary Benn, said the results of this analysis undertaken by the government with the aim of quantifying the potential impact of leaving the EU on the British economy are already largely in the public domain in one format or another. Allowing this information to be considered in its full context rather than selectively quoted, it will help probably to inform public debate about how the figures were arrived at and where the economic effects of Brexit might be. Well, we already know where the economic effects of Brexit might be. So long as you're living in London, you'll be fine. Everywhere else is going to suffer dramatically. The analysis suggests that there will be adverse effects on the UK economy and all its regions, and that the degree of impact will depend on the outcome achieved by the negotiations. However, pro-Brexit MPs question the credibility of the forecast. Jacob Rees-Mogg, who chairs the backbench European Research Group, which haven't released any research by the way, said that the research had been so widely leaked and ridiculed for its approach that it is of little consequence. Why is Jacob Rees-Mogg belittling data, actually gathered data? This is unbelievable that a guy who, well, it's obvious why, because the damage is now obvious, and he's now like, oh no, we can't, oh well, considering actual public, available information, oh well, the public might change their mind if they consider that. Whitehall's officials have warned in the document that any forecasts are highly uncertain given the unprecedented nature of the deal the government hopes to strike, but say the economic forecasts will be necessary to inform negotiations. The International Trade Secretary Liam Fox upped the ante on Thursday as he told business groups at the British Chamber of Commerce annual convention that the EU27 was acting like a gang. The idea of punishing Britain is not in the language of a club, it is the language of a gang, Fox said. We need to begin this argument by putting policies aside and do what is in the economic interests of the people we represent. Well, guess what? That would mean staying in the EU. The Democratic Unionist Party's Westminster leader also toughened her language, attacking the EU's hardening stance on trade and the Irish border at the same event. In speaking in a speech criticising the European Union's bad faith on the border issue, this isn't bad faith, this is just reality, unfortunately. The EU says, what's your plan for the Irish border? And then there isn't one. There is no acceptable plan that would keep the Good Friday peace deal in effect. And remember, this is something that these guys, you know, they want to try and keep and sort out, because it has worked and it has been one of the best peace deals agreement in recent history. And now we're just going to go throw it all away. Because that's unfortunately what these Brextremists seem to want. Just Brexit at any cost, sod the economy, sod the Good Friday Agreement. We're just going to, you know, up anchor and just sail away somewhere. That doesn't, not a plan. That is not a plan. They've never had a plan. But apparently they came out claiming, oh, all those magical stuff that's meant to happen when we leave, and it's going to be great and wonderful. But all the economic forecasts, all the experts are saying it's not. Okay, so she continues. She told the conference, "I object in the strongest terms to people who have limited experience of the troubles in Northern Ireland throwing threats of violence around as some kind of bargaining chip in the negotiation process. They haven't thrown around any threats of violence. To do so is an insult to the people of Northern Ireland who have worked so hard on bringing peace to our community." You know what did bring peace to the community? The fact that there was an open border, and the way that you were able to do that was being a member of the European Union. And remember, Northern Ireland voted overwhelmingly to stay in the European Union. So that's basically what we're on. It's, you know, this is where we're at the moment. The government has no idea what it wants to do, and the EU, ironically, the EU is being thrown all this. Oh, it's the EU's fault. The EU has been very clear from the start. It either goes, hey, you either remain in the single market and customs union, like, you know, the Norway style agreement, or you do a free trade agreement. But the problem is, a free trade agreement is not going to be as wide-reaching or, you know, as complicated as it needs to be, because then the problem is you will need to accept regulation. So if the EU says we want to do this, then, you know, we would have to agree to it as well. Problem is, we are not part of the EU anymore, so we don't get a say on these things. So even then, you're giving up a huge amount of control. And it's just insane. But yeah, Brexit, it always has been and always will be a stupid idea. We will be back within the EU within 5 years. Because the public is going to realise, yeah, all these, you know, Eurosceptics were wrong. They have been wrong for years. But that's where we are. We have an actual impact assessment of Brexit, and people are just going, oh no, it's fake. It's fake. I mean, one of these things, look, in the retail sector, officials calculate that the non-tariff barriers could be equivalent to the EU slapping tariffs of up to 20% on British exports. You know, and chemicals facing tariffs of above 10%. You know, these are what will happen. This is, you know, but you know, this is reality, and this is the problem that people just don't want to face. They're basing it on the fact of a 19th century Britain that had an empire and that could go up to countries with gunboats and just demand things, and we would be given them. These trade agreements that Liam Fox is going to sign are going to be awful and going to be terrible, because we are not as strong as all these, you know, Brextremists have conned themselves into thinking we are. We are only strong when we have been pointing towards Europe. Remember, until we joined the European Union, our economy was falling 10% every decade. And then just joining that curbed it off. So, as already reported, here's again, the analysis suggests that the long-term gains from striking a new trade deal with non-EU countries, a central plank of the pro-Brexit case, would be just 0.2% to 0.7% GDP. These new trade agreements, which we were told would be wonderful and fascinating and would bring, quote, unimaginable wealth to the country, would not replace what we would lose from the EU. They would probably be dwarfed by the losses from a looser relationship with the EU. And this is fun. The think tank for Open Europe played down the scale of the expected downturn, saying that the UK government could use another domestic policy levers to help offset the impact. What did I say in that video when they'd originally been released? Trying to perform and implement policy to try and cover up this long-term loss is going to be impossible to do. It's just not feasible. You know, you'd think that actual data would affect people's views and go, yeah, okay, maybe leaving the EU is not a good idea. But there we go. You also had recently on Panorama how stupid the English, how stupid, this idea of immigration is in our psyche. You had the guy going around and said, okay, immigration, what do we do? And everyone said, oh, we need to cut it. We need to limit immigration. And then he was like, okay, then who do we let in? And he literally had flashcards of, builders, nurses, doctors, all these people with skills, and not a single person said on those flashcards, no, we shouldn't let these people in. The process by which we have been, the British public has been subjected to constant lies about immigration. I mean, you ask anyone in Barnsley, and they will tell you, we're swimming immigrants, we're drowning, they're taking all our jobs. All these job losses that have been affected were because of the 2008 crash. That, the Yorkshire area, and our area in particular, is still suffering from that, that crash. Why? Because there's been no investment. The only people and organisation to actually invest in this area was the EU. I'm lost for words. You had Grimsby, who has gone, we voted to leave the EU, however, we want a special arrangement, which basically just means we keep all the advantages of being in the EU. This is just... What point do you turn around and just go, right, we should just stop it? This is just stupid. This is just ridiculous. This is just an absolute act of self-harm. I don't know how long I've been doing these videos, but you still get people on my comments going, yeah, Brexit, yeah. What's it based on? It's based on nothing. It's based on a building built on quicksand. And as I've said to people, when we leave that March 2019 date, that's when you can start really charting the effects of Brexit. And it's not going to be good. So as I've kept on saying to these people, enjoy these good times while they're lasting. Because after that, it's going to be an economic downturn. We don't know what we're going to end up going on yet. And as I've said before, you can't just turn around and treat, the WTO rules like they're so great, because they're not great. There are videos of experts talking about this out there now that you can go and watch. And I would highly advise going and watch them. We've talked about the most favoured nation clause, which would ultimately undermine us, because a lot of these guys are saying, yeah, it's fine, we can do this. No, you're not. Not when you take that clause into account. But, you know, there we are. That's the state we're in. But, you know, yeah. You know, as I've said right from the very beginning, we can just sit back and just go, well, we told you so.